Welcome. Get comfortable. Settle in. Pull the blanket a little closer, adjust your pillow, and let your eyes go soft. You don't need to concentrate right now. You don't need to remember any of this. You're just here to listen, to let a story wash over you like something distant and ancient and only half real. Tonight, we're going to tell the entire story of the Elden Ring, from the very beginning, before time had a name, all the way to the end, to the moment a tarnished soul stands at the threshold of a new age and chooses what that age will look like. It is a long story. It was never meant to be told all at once. It lives in item descriptions, in quiet conversations with dying gods, in the way a ruined castle sits on a clifftop above a fog-covered sea. It is a story about power and grief and the terrible things people do when they love something so much they cannot let it go. But tonight, we're going to tell it slowly, softly, from start to finish. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. Just breathe and let the lands between come to you. Let's begin. Before there was anything, before the Erdtree glowed golden over green fields, before any kingdom was named, before any living thing drew breath in the lands between, there was something vast and formless moving through the cosmos. The greater will. No one knows exactly what it is. Even the greatest scholars who ever lived in the lands between could not say for certain. It may be a god. It may be something beyond gods, a force of ordering, of direction, a cosmic intelligence that looked upon the chaos of existence and decided it should have a shape. It is the kind of thing that does not speak to you directly. It moves through intermediaries. It sends its thoughts through smaller things. Beings called outer gods, who in turn send their own messengers down into the physical world. The greater will did not create the lands between the way a craftsman builds a table. It did not lay stone by stone. It reached into existence and placed something there, a thing that would act as an ordering principle, a source of power and life and meaning. It placed the Elden Ring. Think of the Elden Ring not as an object at first, though it would become one. Think of it as a law, a rule of reality, a set of truths about how life and death and growth and order are supposed to work. The Elden Ring was the expression of the greater will's design for this world, its vision for what the lands between should be. Every rune within it encoded some fundamental aspect of existence. The greater will sent a messenger to oversee this great work. That messenger was a creature called an Empyrean, or more precisely, a finger maiden. But before we get to her, we need to understand what she would be working with. The greater will needed a vessel. It needed something to hold the Elden Ring in the physical world, to be its caretaker, to be the symbol around which a civilization would grow. And so, at some point, in that hazy, ancient time before recorded history, there came to the lands between a being called the Elden Beast. The Elden Beast is extraordinary. It is a creature born from the stars, a thing that drifted through the cosmos on behalf of the greater will. Long and luminous, ancient beyond measure, it carried within it the Elden Ring itself. It was, in some sense, the Elden Ring's body, the physical form that the law of the greater will took in order to inhabit the world. The Elden Beast came to rest in the lands between, and from that resting, from that presence, something miraculous grew. The Erdtree. The Erdtree rose over the lands between like a golden monument to eternity. Its roots ran deep into the earth, tangling with the very bones of the world. Its branches climbed higher than any mountain. Its glow, soft and golden and warm, touched every corner of the land. And from that glow came grace, a golden light that lived in the ground and in the air and in the blood of certain favored people. Grace was the touch of the greater will on the living. It was guidance. It was blessing. It was the sense that the world had a purpose and that you had a place within it. The Erdtree became the center of everything. It was the axis around which all of civilization in the lands between would eventually turn. But before civilization, there were other things. The world was not empty when the Erdtree grew. There were already creatures there, old things, beings that had lived in the lands between before the greater will arrived. They would come to be called the Crucible. The primordial tangle of life, the wild, unordered mixing of beast and plant and spirit that preceded the Age of Gold. The Crucible was not evil, it was simply old. It was life before it had been sorted and shaped. Creatures of the Crucible bore traits that would later seem monstrous. The tail of a beast, the wings of a bird, horns, scales, a mix of things that did not belong together by the standards of a later, more ordered age. But in the time of the Crucible, there was no standard. There was only life, exuberant and strange. Some of the beings born from the Crucible would become important later. The dragons, for instance, were creatures of the Crucible. So were the ancient giants. And in the very earliest time, before the Erdtree's golden order had fully established itself, these creatures ruled the lands between in their own fashion. But the Erdtree was growing. The greater will's order was spreading. And soon the age of the Crucible would give way to something else. Let us move forward now, into the first age of civilization, the age of Queen Marika, the Eternal. Marika. The name carries so much weight. She is the figure around whom everything in this story turns eventually. She was human once, or something like human. Born to the Numen, a people said to have come from outside the lands between, from somewhere beyond, though they had long since settled and become part of the world. The Numen were a people of great spiritual sensitivity, close to the currents of the world, and Marika was among their most extraordinary. The greater will chose her. Through the intercession of two fingers, the physical messengers of the greater will, strange elongated digit creatures that served as oracles, Marika was elevated. She became an Empyrean, one of a small number of beings who possessed the potential to become a god, to ascend and hold the Elden Ring. She was made immortal. She was made radiant. She was given the power of a deity and the mandate of the greater will to govern the lands between. Marika became the god of the Erdtree. The Elden Ring passed, in some sense, into her keeping, or she into its keeping. They were bound together. She was the vessel through which the Elden Ring expressed itself in the world. Now, a god needs a kingdom, and a kingdom, at least at first, needs to be made. The world was not yet unified under the Erdtree. There were other powers, other gods, other creatures who had no interest in Golden Order. Marika would need help. She found it in Godfrey. Godfrey was not a man who had been born to gentleness. He was a warrior of the Badlands, a place rough and unforgiving, where life was a constant contest of strength. He led a war band, and they fought, not for glory exactly, but because fighting was what the world demanded of them. His beast companion Serosh had been bestowed upon him by the greater will itself, a great lion-like spirit who rode upon Godfrey's back and in doing so attempted to temper his ferocious instincts. Even with Serosh, Godfrey was fearsome. Without him, he might have been something uncontrollable. Marika saw in Godfrey exactly what she needed: a weapon, a champion, the first Elden Lord. They were married. Marika became the god, the queen, the eternal divine. Godfrey became the warrior king, who would extend the Erdtree's dominion by force. Together, They would build the Golden Order, the civilization, the empire, the system of belief and power and law that would come to define the lands between. Their children were called Godwyn, and the twins Morgoth and Mog. Though the twins, born bearing the Omen curse, were hidden away in the sewers beneath the capital, a shameful secret. But Godwyn was celebrated, golden, beloved, the first son of the first Elden Lord. He shone like his mother's light. The wars of the early Golden Order were enormous. Marika and Godfrey fought them together. She directing, he executing. There were the giants. The giants were immense, ancient creatures who had lived in the frozen peaks of the mountaintops of the giants since long before the Erdtree rose. They carried their own fire. They guarded the flame of ruin, a different kind of fire from the Erdtree's golden warmth. It was a destructive fire, capable of burning the Erdtree itself, burning the very root of the greater will's power. Marika could not allow such a threat to persist. The war against the giants was devastating and long. The giants fell eventually, most of them destroyed, their bones left scattered in the frozen north, enormous rib cages and broken skulls half buried in snow. A few survived, chained and diminished, and crucially, the Fell God, the deity the giants worshipped, the source of their fire, was said to have been slain by Marika herself. The fire giants were defeated, but their fire wasn't extinguished. It couldn't be. Marika had one of the last surviving fire giants, badly wounded and incomplete, bound in chains at the peak of the mountaintops, the keeper of the Forge of the Giants, cursed to maintain the fire, just in case it was ever needed. Remember that. It matters later. Then there was the war against the dragons. The ancient dragons of the crumbling Fair Mazula, those primordial crucible-born creatures. They too had been powers in the early world. Some were negotiated with, some were made allies. The ancient dragon Placidusax had once been an Elden Lord himself. In the time before Marika's ascension, a two-headed dragon who had served a god that had since fled the world. He had waited. He was still waiting endlessly in a crumbling ruin outside time. But many of the dragons resisted the Golden Order, and they were brought to heel. Wave after wave of conquest, the Erdtree's light pushed outward. The map of the lands between filled in with golden dominion. Godfrey fought at the center of every campaign, his golden axe of Godfrey rising and falling, the ground trembling beneath his boots. He was the greatest warrior who had ever lived, and the greater will, in its wisdom, stripped him of his grace. When the conquering was done, when there were no more wars to fight, Godfrey was no longer needed in the same way. The greater will did not reward warriors with rest. It sent them away. Grace was taken from Godfrey and his warriors. They became the first Tarnished, the first people to have their golden light extinguished, and Godfrey led them out of the lands between, into the outer world, there to wander and struggle and perhaps be called back someday. He departed without bitterness. That is the remarkable thing. He did not rage against Marika, did not curse the greater will. He simply went. He understood that his role had changed, that the peace he had made possible had no place for him within it. Godfrey became Waralu again, the name he had before Marika, before lordship, before all of it. He wandered, his warband dispersed, and he lived in the outer world, fighting, because fighting was all he had ever really known. He would come back, but that is a story for much later. With Godfrey gone, the lands between entered its first great golden age. Marika ruled from the Erdtree capital, Lindell. The city was extraordinary. Built around the leg of a fallen dragon, Gransax, that had attacked the city long ago and been slain, its enormous corpse still coiled around the outer walls, a monument to Lendel's endurance. Great bell towers, gleaming ramparts, the Erdtree rising behind it all, an eternal sun that never set, its golden light falling on every street and courtyard. The Golden Order was not just a government, it was a religion. It was a way of understanding a religion. It was a way of understanding the world. At its center was a set of laws, some divine and some philosophical, about how life and death and the spirit were supposed to work. In the Golden Order, death was not an ending. The dead were returned to the Erdtree. Their bodies decomposed, and their life force, their runes, their essence, went back into the root system of the great tree to be recycled and reborn. It was the Erdtree who decided when life ended and when it was reborn. Death was a journey back to the root, a return, a rest before the next emergence. This was, in theory, beautiful. The cycle of life and death managed, ordered, presided over by something eternal and golden. But the world was complicated. The world always is. Marika had taken a second husband after Godfrey's departure. His name was Radagon. Radagon is one of the great mysteries of the story, and we'll speak of him carefully. He was a warrior, a scholar of the Golden Order, a man of extraordinary red hair and fierce devotion to Marika's cause. He came to Lendel as a champion, rose to prominence, and eventually became Queen Marika's consort and second Elden Lord. They had children together, 4 remarkable ones. There were the twins Malenia and Miquella, both born as Empyreans, both with the potential to become the next god. Malenia was born cursed with the Scarlet Rot, a terrible, corrosive power that would eventually consume her. Miquella was born cursed with eternal childhood, a boy who could never grow up, no matter how the years passed. These were not ordinary misfortunes. They seemed deliberate, as if the greater will, or perhaps something that opposed it, had marked these children from birth. There were also Rykard and Rennala, but Rennala was actually the daughter of Radagon's first marriage, to the Queen of the Full Moon, the great sorceress Rennala. We'll come to her. And then there were the children of Marika and Radagon together, Malenia and Miquella. But here is the secret that the history books in Lendel would never say plainly. Radagon and Marika were the same person. Somehow, through divine will, through the power of the Elden Ring, through some mystery that may not have even been fully understood by those involved, Marika and Radagon were a single being in 2 bodies, or 2 souls in one body, or something that does not have a clean description. When Marika wished to move through the world as a man, there was Radagon. When Radagon performed his duties and returned to Marika's side, it was a reunion with himself, or herself, or themselves. The implications of this are enormous and disquieting. Marika's children by Radagon were children she had with herself, in a sense. The identity of the divine was fractured in a way that no one in the Golden Order wanted to examine too closely. And Marika herself, beneath the golden serenity of her divine countenance, was beginning to have doubts. The death of Godwyn changed everything. Godwyn the Golden. He was, by every account, everything the Golden Order claimed to produce. Handsome, strong, just, beloved. He had made friends with dragons. Fortisax, an ancient dragon of immense power, became Godwyn's closest companion. They had fought together against the ancient dragon incursions, and afterward, Fortisax simply refused to leave Godwyn's side. The friendship between a human demigod and an ancient dragon was something so extraordinary, so unlike anything the world had seen, that it became one of the great stories of the age. Godwyn did not seem to want power. He did not scheme or plot. He was simply present in the world, golden and warm, and people felt better for knowing him. Someone decided he had to die. The Night of the Black Knives is one of the darkest events in the history of the Lands Between. Not because of the death toll, which was small, but because of what was taken. On a single night, a group of assassins, women who came to be known as the Black Knife Assassins, used weapons of extraordinary power. Their knives had been imbued with a fragment of the Rune of Death. The Rune of Death was one of the fundamental runes within the Elden Ring, the divine law governing mortality itself. It had been removed from the Elden Ring at some point, extracted from it by Marika herself, in an act of divine surgery that no one fully understood at the time. Without the Rune of Death in the Elden Ring, death in the Lands Between no longer functioned properly. The dead no longer returned to the Erdtree. They simply lingered, not quite alive, not quite gone. This was either a safety measure or an act of rebellion or both. Marika had done it deliberately, but her reasons were not announced. The Black Knife Assassins used weapons infused with a fragment of that stolen death. And when they struck Godwyn the Golden, they did not simply kill him. They killed his soul while leaving his body alive. It is hard to imagine a worse fate. Godwyn's body continued, not living exactly, but persisting, growing, changing. Over time, deep in the roots of the Erdtree where his body was interred, it became something nightmarish. The bodiless soul, the living dead flesh, proliferating and spreading through the roots of the tree. His body would eventually fill the catacombs beneath the capital, enormous and wrong, covered in faces, still beautiful in a horrifying way. This was the first death of a demigod. It was also, in its way, the first crack in the Golden World. Who ordered it? The answer, obscured and debated, points to an Empyrean princess named Ranni. Ranni the Witch, daughter of Radagon and Rennala, sister to Rykard and Radagon, stepdaughter to Marika. She had been designated by the Two Fingers as a potential successor to Marika, an Empyrean who might one day hold the Elden Ring. But Ranni had other ideas. She had made contact with something else, something that was not the Greater Will. There are other cosmic powers in the universe of Elden Ring. The Greater Will is one of several outer gods, vast alien intelligences that occasionally reach into the physical world and attempt to shape it according to their own designs. One of these was the Scarlet Rot, the disease that had cursed millennia. Another was the Frenzied Flame, a terrifying fire that promised the dissolution of all boundaries between people, a forced unity achieved by burning everything away. And there was something called the Two Fingers opposite, the 1.5 fingers, the guidance from outside the Golden Order. But the power Ranni contacted was older and stranger than these. It was an outer god of the deep cosmos. And through this contact, Ranni made a plan. She wanted to break free of the Greater Will's design. She did not want to be a vessel for its power. She wanted to establish a new age, an age in which the power of the outer gods could no longer reach into the world, in which life and death and fate might run on their own course, free of divine interference. To do this, she needed the Rune of Death. On the Night of the Black Knives, while the assassins struck Godwyn, Ranni performed her own dark ritual. She used a fragment of the Rune of Death on herself, killing her own soul while preserving her body. She severed herself from her flesh, placed her soul into a small doll, and sent her original body to die alongside Godwyn's. If anyone searched for the soul that killed Godwyn, they would find only a dead demigod. Ranni escaped. Her soul in its doll body began a long, long plan. Centuries of preparation, centuries of searching for the Empyrean rune she would need to complete her vision. And Marika, who had hidden the rune of death in the first place, who had perhaps known that something like this was coming, Marika was left to grieve. Her firstborn son was dead in the worst possible way, and the world was about to get much worse. Marika broke. Perhaps that is too simple. Perhaps what happened was more complicated. An act of grief, yes, but also an act of rebellion, a continuation of whatever impulse had led her to remove the rune of death from the Elden Ring in the first place. A god who has begun to doubt. A mother who has watched her son become something impossible and wrong. Marika shattered the Elden Ring. She took up Godwyn's weapon. The hammer or the sword, accounts differ. And she struck the Elden Ring, and it broke. The most fundamental ordering principle of the world, the divine law placed by the greater will into the heart of the lands between, fractured into pieces. The pieces of the Elden Ring became the great runes. Each great rune was a shard of divine power, containing a fragment of the laws that had governed the world. And the children of Marika and Radagon, the Demigods, those beings of divine blood who had been born into greatness, each inherited one. Godric would eventually claim one. Radon held one. Rykard held one. Morgoth held one. Morg held one. Malenia and Miquella shared theirs in a complicated sense. The shattering of the Elden Ring did not just create new power dynamics. It broke the world. The Golden Order, which had been held together by the Elden Ring's invisible laws, began to fracture. The Erdtree's power faltered. The ordered cycling of life and death became irregular. People died and came back wrong, or didn't come back at all. The lands between, which had been a single connected civilization under Lendel's golden rule, splintered into warring territories, and the demigods, who now each held a great rune, went to war with each other. The Shattering. The war was catastrophic. It was not a series of battles, but a world-consuming conflagration. Centuries of demigods throwing armies at each other, each seeking to claim enough great runes to somehow restore the Elden Ring and become the new lord of the Golden Order. The landscape of the lands between was transformed by the violence. Forests were burned, coasts were reshaped. The rot spread from Malenia's territory in the Haligtree. Radon's hold on the stars, maintained by his extraordinary gravitational sorcery, stopped functioning when he was eventually consumed by the scarlet rot. And in the midst of all this, somewhere at the center of the chaos, Marika was silent. The greater will had punished her for the shattering. She was imprisoned within the Erdtree, her body suspended at the foot of the great tree inside its golden sanctum, struck and shattered herself. Her form cracked, her divinity fractured, her consciousness perhaps split between herself and Radagon, that other self who occupied the same body. She had done what she had done. Now she waited. 2 fingers across the lands between issued new guidance. The grace that still persisted in the world, thin and attenuated, a candle where once there had been a sun, pointed toward a distant hope. The Elden Ring could be restored. A new Elden Lord could be chosen. And for that, someone would need to gather the great runes and bring them to the Elden Ring's shattered remnants. That someone would be a Tarnished. The Tarnished had been gone from the lands between for a very long time. Godfrey and his warriors had been cast out before the Golden Age had even fully begun. They had gone into the outer world, beyond the fog, beyond the borders, out into places that had no golden light and no Erdtree and no grace. And for generations, they had lived there. They had had children, and those children had had children. And after enough time, The original exile became simply the way things were. The Tarnished built lives out there. Harsh, unglamorous lives. The outer world was not gentle, but they were resilient people, descended from the warriors who had conquered the lands between in the first place. And they were different from ordinary people in one crucial way. They did not stay dead. The grace that had been taken from them was gone, but the Erdtree's blessing lingered in their blood, a faded, residual thing. When a Tarnished died, they simply came back. They would appear at a site of grace, or a stake of Marika, or wherever the thin remnants of golden light still reached them, and they would rise and continue. Death was a setback, not an ending. This had been true since before the Shattering and remained true after. This made the Tarnished remarkable warriors. You cannot defeat an army that simply gets back up. When the Shattering happened, the grace changed. It reached out beyond the lands between, into the outer world where the Tarnished wandered, and it called, not loudly. It was a gentle pull, a golden glow on the horizon, a feeling that somewhere distant there was a purpose waiting to be claimed. One by one, and then in waves, the Tarnished began to come back. They crossed the borders. They entered the Limgrave coastline, most of them, washing up on the shores of the First Step, finding themselves in a broken world that had been told of their coming, but was not entirely happy about it. The inhabitants of the lands between had complicated feelings about the Tarnished. The grace favored them, but favored for what? To fight through the ruins of the civilization that had stood for centuries. To walk through the graveyards of the Shattering and pick through what remained. Many of the Tarnished who came back were broken by what they found. The world was not what the legends had promised. There was no welcoming court, no easy path to lordship. There was a land torn apart by demigod warfare, haunted by the remnants of the Golden Order's glory, guarded by things that should have died long ago but hadn't. Most Tarnished failed, most gave up or went hollow, mad and purposeless, wandering the ruins without the will to keep trying. Some found niches, merchant scholars haunting underground tunnels, warriors for hire, grave robbers, cultists serving one demigod or another. Many simply tried to survive, but the grace did not call to most of them anymore. It had a specific purpose, and it was searching for a specific kind of person, someone it would call a Tarnished maidenless, someone with no guidance, no patron, no predetermined path, someone the whole world was open to, someone who might, if they were strong enough and stubborn enough and strange enough, find a way through everything and emerge at the other end having made a choice about the world. You, or rather, the one the story calls the Tarnished, the one who begins with nothing, not even a name. Let us walk through the lands between as it exists at the time of the story, so that you can feel its shape. The land begins at the coast, specifically the Weeping Peninsula to the south and the rolling green fields of Limgrave to the north. It is, despite everything, beautiful here. The Erdtree glows gold on the horizon, always visible, always distant. The grass is green. The coastal cliffs are dramatic. There are ruins everywhere, yes, castles fallen to ruin, churches shattered, graves upon graves, but even the ruins have a kind of beauty to them. The first major human presence a Tarnished encounters is Stormvale Castle. Stormvale sits on a clifftop overlooking the Western Sea, connected to the main land by a narrow bridge. It was once a seat of the Golden Order's power, and in some diminished sense it still is. But the power that holds it now is of a different and more desperate kind. Godric the Grafted rules Stormvale, Godric is, in almost every way, a tragic figure, though a villainous one. He is of the lineage of Godfrey, one of the last remaining descendants of the first Elden Lord. This lineage should make him great, but Godric was always overshadowed. He was not as strong as his cousins. He was mocked and dismissed at the courts of Leyndell. He had something to prove, always, and the weight of what he had to prove bent him into something crooked. After the Shattering, Godric took possession of a great rune and retreated to Stormvale, and then he began grafting. The grafting was his solution to weakness. He had not been born with enough power, so he would take power from others. He captured warriors, Tarnished, soldiers, anyone he could find, and he cut off their arms and legs and heads and grafted these pieces to his own body. His arms number in the dozens, a swollen mass of limbs spreading from his shoulders. At the climax of battle, he cuts off his own arm and attaches a dragon's head in its place, breathing fire, terrible and desperate and grotesque. He wanted to be an Elden Lord. He wanted it so badly that he unmade himself trying to get there. The Tarnished, arriving in Limgrave, will have to face Godric eventually. His castle stands between the coast and the great roads leading deeper into the lands between. But Stormvale is not the only thing in Limgrave. There is also the Church of Elleh, ruins of an old trading post where a ghost named Kalle sells his wares under the open sky. There is the Lake of Agheel, where a dragon has taken up residence. There are the Siofra River wells that lead underground to a vast subterranean world, deeper and older than anything above. And there is the Round Table Hold. The Round Table Hold is a place between worlds, literally. It exists outside the lands between, accessible only through grace, a kind of staging area for Tarnished, who have been called. It is where the fingers of the two fingers still speak, giving guidance to anyone who will listen. It is where several characters gather. Nefeli Lu, a strong warrior who turns out to be Godfrey's adopted daughter. Fia, the deathbed companion, who holds people close in her arms and whispers to them of death. Dialos, a young nobleman looking for his missing servant. Sir Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, who has made it his business to gather every scrap of information about the Demigods and their great runes. Dee, a hunter of the undead. Rogier, a sorcerer investigating the mysteries of the Shattering. Each of them has a story. Each of them is trying in their own way to make sense of a world that has come apart. Beyond Stormvale, the land opens into Liurnia of the Lakes. Liurnia is a flooded region. Vast, shallow lakes stretching to the horizon. Barely ankle-deep in some places, treacherous in others, dotted with the ruins of towers and manors that were once great and are now half submerged, their occupants transformed into wandering spirits or strange blue jellyfish-like beings called spirit jellyfish. The water came with the Shattering, or perhaps before it. Liurnia was once the seat of sorcerous power in the lands between, home to the Academy of Raya Lucaria, a great school of glintstone sorcery, the counterpart to the faith-based incantations of the Golden Order. Sorcery in the lands between draws on glintstone, a crystalline material that forms when the energy of distant stars is trapped in rock. The scholars of Raya Lucaria believed they could understand the universe through the study of this stellar energy. The Academy still stands. It is extraordinary, a vast institutional complex built into and around a sheer rock face, its towers clinging impossibly to vertical surfaces, its courtyards filled with magical automata called living jars and glintstone turtles. Red-robed sorcerers wander the halls. Something is wrong with many of them. They have lost their minds, or their minds have been captured by the full moon's power. At the heart of the academy is Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. Renala is one of the most complex and sympathetic figures in the story. She was once the greatest sorceress in the lands between, the master of the moon's power, a visionary scholar and the leader of the Carian royal family, the noble house that had governed Liurnia for generations. She was formidable, brilliant and independent, having kept the academy free from Leyndell's Golden Order by main force of arms. Then Radagon came. He came as an enemy, at the head of a Golden Order army, seeking to bring Raya Lucaria into the Erdtree's fold. But the war ended in marriage. Radagon and Renala wed, and for a time they were, by all accounts, genuinely happy. He gave her a golden seed. She treasured it as a symbol of their love. They had 3 children, Radan, Rykard, and Ranni. And then Radagon left. He was called back to Leyndell, called back to Marika, called back to the divine business that was, in the end, more important than any human happiness. He became Marika's second husband, her other self, the second Elden Lord. Renala was left with her children and her grief. She did not handle it well, or rather, she handled it in the way that a person of immense power handles devastating loss. She turned inward. She took her golden seed, the symbol of Radagon's love, and she sat with it in the grand library of the academy, and she simply stopped leading. She stopped functioning. She retreated into a private world of memory and madness, playing with the pieces of the past, surrounding herself with students who adored her, holding the golden seed and rocking and humming to herself. The academy fell into chaos. The students who worshipped her formed a protective circle. They would not let her be disturbed. The ones outside that circle had to manage themselves. When the Tarnished arrives at Renala's chamber, they fight through layers of that devotion. The students have literally given their bodies to protect her, becoming a composite creature that must be destroyed. And when it is, when the protective shell is broken, and Renala herself must be confronted, she is, in the end, not a monster. She is a mother who lost the person she loved and could not find a reason to move on. She does not die when defeated. She simply returns to herself for a moment and offers a bargain. She can remake people using her power of rebirth. The golden seed she carries gives her the ability to reshape the soul. She cannot restore what was taken from her, but she can give that gift to others. She becomes a crucial figure for the Tarnished, the one who allows them to fundamentally reshape who they are. Her children scattered after the Shattering. Radan holds Caelid. Rykard holds Volcano Manor. Ranni is her own story. Beyond Stormvale, the land opens into Liurnia of the Lakes. Liurnia is a flooded region. Vast, shallow lakes stretching to the horizon, barely ankle-deep in some places, treacherous in others, dotted with the ruins of towers and manors that were once great and are now half submerged. Their occupants transformed into wandering spirits or strange blue jellyfish-like beings called spirit jellyfish. The water came with the Shattering, or perhaps before it. Liurnia was once the seat of sorcerous power in the lands between, home to the Academy of Raya Lucaria, a great school of glintstone sorcery, the counterpart to the faith-based incantations of the Golden Order. Sorcery in the lands between draws on glintstone, a crystalline material that forms when the energy of distant stars is trapped in rock. The scholars of Raya Lucaria believed they could understand the universe through the study of this stellar energy. The academy still stands. It is extraordinary. A vast institutional complex built into and around a sheer rock face, its towers clinging impossibly to vertical surfaces, its courtyards filled with magical automata called living jars and glintstone turtles. Red-robed sorcerers wander the halls. Something is wrong with many of them. They have lost their minds, or their minds have been captured by the full moon's power. At the heart of the academy is Ranni, queen of the full moon. Ranni is one of the most complex and sympathetic figures in the story. She was once the greatest sorceress in the lands between, the master of the moon's power, a visionary scholar and the leader of the Korean royal family, the noble house that had governed Liurnia for generations. She was formidable, brilliant, and independent, having kept the academy free from Leindel's Golden Order by main force of arms. Then Radagon came. He came as an enemy at the head of a Golden Order army, seeking to bring Raya Lucaria into the Erdtree's fold. But the war ended in marriage. Radagon and Ranni wed, and for a time they were, by all accounts, genuinely happy. He gave her a golden seed. She treasured it as a symbol of their love. They had 3 children, Radagon, Rykard, and Ranni. And then Radagon left. He was called back to Leindel, called back to Marika, called back to the divine business that was, in the end, more important than any human happiness. He became Marika's second husband, her other self, the second Elden Lord. Ranni was left with her children and her grief. She did not handle it well, or rather, she handled it in the way that a person of immense power handles devastating loss. She turned inward. She took her golden seed, the symbol of Radagon's love, and she sat with it in the grand library of the academy, and she simply stopped leading. She stopped functioning. She retreated into a private world of memory and madness, playing with the pieces of the past, surrounding herself with students who adored her, holding the golden seed and rocking and humming to herself. The academy fell into chaos. The students who worshipped her formed a protective circle. They would not let her be disturbed. The ones outside that circle had to manage themselves. When the Tarnished arrives at Ranni's chamber, they fight through layers of that devotion. The students have literally given their bodies to protect her, becoming a composite creature that must be destroyed. And when it is, when the protective shell is broken, and Ranni herself must be confronted, she is in the end not a monster. She is a mother who lost the person she loved and could not find a reason to move on. She does not die when defeated. She simply returns to herself for a moment and offers a bargain. She can remake people using her power of rebirth. The golden seed she carries gives her the ability to reshape the soul. She cannot restore what was taken from her, but she can give that gift to others. She becomes a crucial figure for the Tarnished, the one who allows them to fundamentally reshape who they are. Her children scattered after the Shattering. Radagon holds Caelid. Rykard holds Volcano Manor. Ranni is her own story. The lands between have layers. Above ground is the world most people know, the hills and forests and lakes and ruins. But below ground, far below, is another world entirely. And below that, further still, is another. The underground rivers, the Siofra River, the Ainsel River, the Lake of Rot, are not simply caves. They are ecosystems, ancient cities, civilizations that predate the Golden Order, that predate perhaps even the coming of the Erdtree, that reached their zenith and their ruin long before Marika was born. The Eternal Cities, Nokron, Nokstella, cities of the Nox. The Nox are a people shrouded in mystery. They seem to have been related to the people of the above-ground world, but they turned their gaze downward rather than upward, or they were forced underground. The stories disagree. Some believe they were cast beneath the earth by Marika, punished for some transgression against the Golden Order. Others suggest they were simply the descendants of those who preferred the cool underground to the Erdtree's light. Whatever the reason, they built extraordinary things. Their architecture is curving and organic, grown as much as built, lit by stars that are actually the glowing roots of the Erdtree coming through the cavern ceilings. They had their own culture, their own gods. They worshipped a different manifestation of the divine, something associated with the moon and with shadow. They built the Fingerslayer blade. The Fingerslayer blade is a weapon capable of injuring a two fingers, capable of striking at the physical messengers of the greater will itself. Building such a weapon was, presumably, the transgression for which they were punished. Ranni wants this weapon. Ranni, planning her long game from within her doll body, has been guiding the Tarnished toward this discovery. She needs the Fingerslayer blade to complete her plan, and the blade is in Nokron, buried with the Nox who made it. Nokron became accessible when Radagon died and his star fell, opening a crater. Before that, it was sealed. When the Tarnished descends through the crack in the earth and into Nokron, they find a city frozen in tragedy. The Nox are not quite alive, not quite dead. They perform the motions of their lives. They fight, they move, they animate the silver spirits they created. But there is an absence of purpose, a repetition without meaning, a civilization still going through the motions of existing. Deeper still is Noxtella, the eternal city, larger and more impressive but similarly haunted. And beside it, accessible through Noxtella's drowned passages, is the Lake of Rot. The Lake of Rot is exactly what it sounds like, a lake filled with scarlet rot, spreading endlessly in a vast underground cavern. Crossing it is an act of endurance and desperation. At the far end is a passage, and at the end of that passage, in a coffin sealed by the power of the great Dragonkin soldier, is something waiting. Someone, actually. Mikella's egg. But we'll get to Mikella. First, let us go to the higher altitudes, to the places above Liurnia and Limgrave, to the lands of giants and ancient lords. The Altus Plateau sits above Liurnia, reachable through the grand lift of Dectus, or through the narrow, treacherous, ruin-strewn precipice. It is a different scale up here. Broader horizons, bigger skies, the feeling of elevation not just physical, but symbolic. The Altus Plateau is the approach to Leyndell. It is the land of ancient estates and manor houses, of former noble families trying to maintain their dignity in the chaos. Windmills grinding on cliffs above bodies of people who dance themselves to death. The ruins of a battlefield, where the war of the Shattering passed through. Golden sunflowers nodding in fields beside roads that once carried the carriages of the court. And at the center of it all, Leyndell, royal capital. Leyndell, there are cities that are simply cities, places where people live and work and get on with the business of existence. And then there are cities that are arguments, cities that exist to make a point about power and beauty and the right order of things. Leyndell is the second kind. It was built around the Erdtree. Every street, every avenue, every great building oriented itself toward the golden glow of the tree's trunk rising through the center of the city, like the axis of the world. The architecture is magnificent. Soaring arches, golden decoration, enormous statues of the Elden Ring's runes carved in stone. The seat of the Elden Lord is here, the Erdtree Sanctuary, the place where Godfrey once stood, with Marika by his side, and the body of a dragon, Gransax, ancient Gransax, who long ago launched an attack on Leyndell. No one is entirely certain why, whether it was a last act of rebellion from the old Dragon Order or something else entirely. The city defeated him somehow, and his corpse remained where it fell. coiled around the outer walls of the capital, slowly being integrated into the architecture. His spear still stands lodged in the cliff top above the city. When the Tarnished arrives at Leyndell, it is not quite the city it was. The Shattering happened, the Demigods went to war, and Leyndell is under siege, not from enemies outside its walls, but from the Erdtree itself. The Erdtree has spread, its roots and branches have pushed out of the sanctum and into the streets. Great golden tentacles of supernatural vegetation pushing through walls and floors, Erdtree avatars, enormous walking masses of root and branch, patrolling the inner sanctums. The Elden Ring's absence has made the Erdtree grow in strange, uncontrolled ways. Guarding the city, in his way, is Morgott, the Omen King. Morgott, the true name of the figure who called himself Margit the Fell, who appeared at the gates of Stormveil Castle to test the Tarnished before they were ready to face Godric. He was there as a warning, a gatekeeper. But Morgott is more than a wandering guard. He is a son of Marika and Radagon, born with the Omen curse. The stigmata of divine blood expressing itself as physical abnormality, horns, leaking golden ichor, power classified as shameful by the Golden Order's laws. He and his twin Morg were hidden in the sewers beneath Leyndell as children, growing up in darkness and shame. But Morgott loved the Golden Order anyway. This is the tragedy that defines him. He was rejected by the system he dedicated himself to protecting, shunted into the sewers, branded as cursed, not allowed to participate in the civilization built in part by his own parents. And yet, he called himself the last of all kings. He took it upon himself to guard Leyndell, even without being asked, even without being recognized, even without a great rune. Even though he had renounced the Demigods' inheritance, that should have been his. He fights with his own cursed blood, golden ichor that he shapes into weapons. He is swift and precise and tragic. When he is defeated, he speaks of the Tarnished's futility, not with contempt, but with something closer to sorrow. He does not believe anyone can restore the Elden Ring. He has watched too many try. After Morgott, the doors to the Erdtree itself. And here there is a problem. The Erdtree will not open. An impenetrable golden barrier surrounds it, resisting even the combined power of multiple great runes. There is only one thing in the world that can burn the Erdtree open. The flame of ruin, held by the fire giant in the frozen north. To reach the mountaintops, one must pass through Leyndell to the Grand Lift of Rold, which ascends from the plateau into the high peaks. The lift itself is monumental, an ancient system of counterweights and massive stone platforms, built in an age when such things were simply done because they needed to be. The mountaintops of the giants are bleak and beautiful in the way that all extreme places are. Snow, ice, the frozen corpses of the ancient giants, bones like small mountains themselves, half buried in white. The wind is constant. The sky is vast and empty. The fire giants lived here. Past tense, almost entirely. They were destroyed in Marika's war, their fell god slain, their people reduced to a handful of survivors. The last survivor, the one Marika kept alive, is the last fire giant. The last fire giant is immense, far larger than a person, large enough that fighting him is a matter of attacking his ankles first, working upward. He lost part of himself in the ancient war. He bears a great wound in his torso, a hollow where fire burns from within. He is the last, and he knows it, and he fights with the kind of ferocity that only something with nothing left to lose can summon. He is the keeper of the Forge of the Giants. At the peak of the mountain tops, the forge still burns, an ancient hearth, the source of the flame of ruin, maintained by this one chained survivor. The Tarnished must defeat him, and then must go to the forge. At the forge there is a choice, not a metaphorical one, a literal, terrible choice presented by the world itself. To open the Erdtree requires the flame of ruin, but the flame of ruin is not simply a key. It is a catastrophic power. Using it to burn the Erdtree will burn not just the tree, it will burn the world. Except it won't, or not entirely. It will burn Leyndell. It will destroy the current form of the Erdtree, reduce it to a burnt stump. But the roots will survive deep underground. The tree will regrow, eventually. This is not the end of everything. It is the end of this age of the tree, the end of the Golden Order as it currently stands. Marika, it seems, wanted this. The Shabriri, the Lord of Frenzied Flame, lurks here as well, representing a different power entirely. The Frenzied Flame, the fire that burns all boundaries between souls, the fire of absolute dissolution. This is not the same as the Forge. They are different threats, different temptations. If the Tarnished embraces only the Forge, burns the Erdtree with the flame of ruin, they can proceed into what remains, into the charred stump of the tree, into the ruins of Leyndell, now ash, into the heart of the matter. But before we follow the Tarnished into that last passage, there are other stories we should not leave unfinished. Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, son of Radagon and Renala, brother of Radagon and Ranni. He studied at the Academy of Raya Lucaria, like his siblings, but where Radagon went to war and Ranni turned to the cosmic, Rykard turned to philosophy, a dark philosophy. Rykard believed the Golden Order was corrupt. He believed the relationship between the demigods and the greater will was fundamentally unjust, that they were being used, that their power existed only to serve a cosmic entity that had no care for their lives or happiness. He organized something called the anti-god movement, attracted followers who shared his resentment, bandits, assassins, the disinherited, the vengeful. And then he did something that made all of his philosophical positions rather beside the point. He fed himself to a god, not the greater will, a different god, an ancient deity in the form of a great serpent, the god-devouring serpent, which had been sealed beneath Mount Gelmir at the edge of Liurnia. Rykard gave himself to the snake, and the snake consumed him, and then the snake became him, or he became the snake, or they became something new, a merged entity that was part Rykard's consciousness and part ancient serpentine hunger. He called himself, afterward, the Lord of Blasphemy. Volcano Manor, his seat of power, sits on the edge of a volcanic caldera, half submerged in the red-hot magma that flows through its halls. His followers are a cult of assassination. They send their initiates out to kill targets across the lands between, targeting specifically the Tarnished, who seem most likely to succeed in their quest. They want to prevent the restoration of the Golden Order. Rykard's lair, at the end of the manor's passages, is the belly of the serpent that ate him. The battle with him is a battle in fire and acid against a thing that speaks in Rykard's voice while bearing a snake's enormous body. When defeated, what remains of Rykard makes clear his motivations. He wanted to feast upon the gods themselves, to turn the predator-prey relationship between divine powers and mortal lives upside down. It is a grotesque ambition, but one with a comprehensible root. His great rune, freed from his grasp, is another piece toward the restoration of the ring. There exists, in the far north of the lands between, accessible only through a hidden path, through a secret rite using two halves of a medallion hidden away by those who wanted it forgotten. A tree, not the Erdtree. its opposite in some ways. The Haligtree, Miquella's Haligtree. Miquella planted it. Let us talk about Miquella. Miquella is one of the most extraordinary beings in this story. Extraordinary not for conquest or power in the conventional sense, but for the sheer scope of what he attempted to create. He was born as an Empyrean, capable of becoming a god, but born with a curse, eternal childhood. He would never age. No matter how the years passed, he remained a child, trapped in the body of youth, unable to grow into the divine adulthood his nature promised. His twin sister Malenia was cursed with the scarlet rot, and Miquella, who loved his sister with the devotion of someone who has watched the person they love most suffer endlessly, dedicated his entire existence to curing her. He researched, he learned, he pushed the boundaries of the Golden Order's incantation system and then pushed beyond them, into areas the Order considered forbidden. He attempted to create his own Erdtree, a tree that would grow separate from Marika's dominion, one that might support a different kind of divine order, one that could heal rather than simply ordain. The Haligtree grew, slowly, from a golden seed, much like the one Radagon gave Rennala. Miquella poured himself into it. His blood, his power, his love. He attracted followers. The Albinaurics, two-legged creatures of silvery complexion who were rejected by the Golden Order and had nowhere else to go. Elites of the Golden Order who had become disillusioned. People who came because Miquella had a quality unlike any other. A kind of unconditional warmth, a charm that was not quite natural. People said being near Miquella was like being loved absolutely, completely, without judgment. They would do anything for him. Some wondered if this was genuinely Miquella's nature, or if it was something he projected intentionally, an Empyrean's power over emotion, a magnetism that bordered on control. Miquella himself may not have known the answer. The Haligtree grew, and millennia came to it, and there was hope, and then Radan and the Scarlet Bloom, and the battle in Caelid, and millennia returned to the Haligtree, weakened and infected and wrong. The rot came with her. The Haligtree, which should have been a place of healing, began to decay. Before the battle with Radan, Miquella had done something else. He had entered into a state of stasis, hibernation, within a great egg of golden resin, attempting to accelerate his own aging, to push past the curse of youth by sheer willpower. He placed himself in the egg. He put it in a place he thought was safe. Mog found it. Mog, Lord of Blood, the twin of Morgoth, the other child hidden in the sewers, where Morgoth emerged from his underground exile with devotion to the order that rejected him. Mog emerged with something else, an outer god's attention, the formless mother, a being of blood and hunger, an outer god that whispered to Mog in the darkness of the sewers, that offered him power in exchange for worship. Mog accepted. He learned to weaponize blood, to use hemorrhage and crimson rot as divine power. He created a dynasty, not of conquest exactly, but of devotion. Mog's followers, the Mogwin dynasty, are fanatical worshippers drawn from the margins, failed Tarnished, desperate people, those who had given up on the Golden Order and needed something else to believe in. He built his dynasty in a place called Mogwin Palace, a hidden realm accessible through a portal or through the deepest underground passages, a blood-soaked cavern of red water and calcified warriors lit by geysers of crimson. And he took Miquella. Miquella, in his egg sleeping. Mog kidnapped him, brought him to Mogwin Palace, attempted to use Miquella's Empyrean nature, his warmth, his power, to raise Mog himself to godhood. to make Miquella into his own personal divine consort, to love and be loved by a god. It didn't work. Miquella's love could not be taken. It could only be given. And the Miquella in the egg was not responsive. He slept on, his arm emerging from the egg like something reaching toward a dawn that never came. When the Tarnished reaches Mogwyn Palace and faces Mog, they face a being maddened by frustrated love and power. When he is defeated and his body falls and the egg cracks open, what comes out of the egg is not quite Miquella. Or perhaps it is the part of Miquella that Mog did not capture, the soul that had already, long ago, departed into another world to continue its work. Miquella is not saved. He is simply somewhere else. A later concern, crumbling Farum Azula. There is no way to reach it directly. It exists outside of normal space in some fashion. A city in the sky, or a city that was taken out of the normal flow of time and placed elsewhere. Great stone platforms and towers connected by bridges that span over nothing, swirling in a permanent tornado of wind and ash, lightning perpetually illuminating the deep grey clouds. A place where the ancient dragons lived before the age of the Erdtree, before the Golden Order changed the world. The design is extraordinary in a way that nothing else in the lands between quite matches. Dragon skulls and bones are incorporated into the architecture. Living dragons still patrol the upper reaches. Beastmen, the servants of the beast clergy, those who serve under Marika's finger reader Gurunk, move through its corridors. And at its heart is Maliketh. Maliketh, the Black Blade, the shadow of Marika, her loyal servant, her weapon, her guard dog. He is a beastman of immense size and ferocity, draped in black, wielding a curved blade infused with the power of the rune of death. Because Maliketh holds it, this is the connection. The rune of death that Marika removed from the Elden Ring. The fragment of death that the Black Knife assassins used to kill Godwyn. Marika took the bulk of that rune and gave it to Maliketh for safekeeping. He is the guardian of death itself, the keeper of the thing that keeps the world orderly. Death must be kept somewhere, contained, controlled. Maliketh is its container. His face is hidden. Half of him is this immense, powerful beast warrior. But there is another face within the beast, a gentler form, a creature who serves willingly, who was given something to protect and has protected it since before memory. When the Tarnished reaches Farum Azula, they fight through an impossible city, through dragons and storm, to reach Maliketh, and the battle is extraordinary. 2 phases, Maliketh transforming in its second half into something terrible and fast and wrapped in black energy. When Maliketh falls, the rune of death is freed, and the world changes. Lendil, royal capital, transforms. The release of the rune of death, after so long being held separately from the world, floods back into reality, and suddenly the Golden Order's central failing is exposed. For centuries, people who had died had not truly passed on. They lingered, they festered. The undead who had been plaguing the lands between, wandering hollow, the half-living, those who could not rest, all of them had been victims of the world's broken death. When the rune is freed, many of them can finally die, and Lendil is covered in ash, the Erdtree burning behind it. The city transformed from gold to grey. This is the city that waits for the Tarnished at the end of everything. Throughout all of this, Ranni has been present. She appears early, in the church of Ele, at midnight, if the Tarnished rests and waits and is approached. A doll form, a small puppet with 2 pairs of arms and 4 eyes, white hair, floating. She offers a spirit-calling bell and a lone wolf, Ashes. Gifts. She says her name is Renna, and then she leaves. Later, If the Tarnished seeks her out, she is found in her rise in northern Lurnia. The three sisters, 3 towers in the flooded north, one shattered by an Erdtree branch, one sealed, one accessible. Ranni's rise. She asks for help. What she wants is the Fingerslayer blade from Nokron. What she offers in return is the chance to serve her, to become her Tarnished, and eventually to participate in her great work. Her servants are extraordinary. There is Bled, the Wolfman. Blad is a half-wolf, one of Ranni's shadows, conjured as a protector by the 2 fingers. He was supposed to watch over her, and if she deviated from the Greater Will's plans, to stop her. But Bled, who had lived beside Ranni for years, who knew her as a person, rather than an instrument of divine will, Bled chose her. When the 2 fingers mandate was made clear, Bled rejected it. He stayed. There is Iji, a war counselor, an ancient troll, steadfast and sad. There is Seluvis, a sorcerer of dubious ethics who uses Ranni's quest as cover for his own experiments, creating puppet people from those who come too close to his tower. And there is Rogier, the sorcerer at the Round Table Hold, who has been investigating the same mysteries, following the same threads, who in the end can only pass his findings along to Ranni's cause and rest. The Fingerslayer blade is brought to Ranni. She uses it on her own 2 fingers, kills the messenger of the greater will that had been assigned to her, severs the last cord binding her to the path she was supposed to walk. She is free. From Ranni, the Tarnished receives the miniature Ranni doll, a small object to be taken everywhere, spoken to at sights of grace, patient and quiet at first, and then, eventually, speaking. Ranni sends the Tarnished on a journey. Find the treasure of Noxtella. Find the baleful shadow that hunts her. Find the path into the deepest underground. The baleful shadow is, of course, Blade's dark mirror, another of Ranni's shadows, one that chose differently. At the end of the underground passages, in the sealed chest beyond the Lake of Rot, is the Dark Moon Ring, and at the Cathedral of Manus Celes, at the top of the Moonlight Altar, where the Ranni's original body was laid to rest, where the meteor from an outer cosmos struck the lands between. Ranni is waiting. She needs the ring placed on her finger, the ritual of the Kerian royal family, the ancient rite, a promise. When the Tarnished places the ring on Ranni's finger, she stirs. She wakes from the long sleep she had entered since the night of the Black Knives. She has what she needs, and she dissolves, ascending in a shower of light, going to the cosmos to do what she has spent centuries preparing to do. If the Tarnished chooses to serve Ranni, chooses to be her consort, her age's lord, her partner in the new order, then at the end of the game, after everything else, Ranni descends on a blue moon to the Elden Throne, and she and the Tarnished depart together into the stars, and the age that follows is the Age of Stars. An age without the Greater Will's interference, an age of mystery and distance, of life following its own course, of death and birth proceeding without divine micromanagement. It sounds cold perhaps, but Ranni argues, and it is hard to entirely disagree, that true freedom requires the chance to make mistakes. The Greater Will's order was good for the Greater Will. The Age of Stars would be good for the people who lived in it. It is one possible ending, perhaps the most poetic one. It rises from her and expands to fill the chamber. The Elden Beast. Long and undulating, luminous, draped in what look like constellations trailing nebulae. It is entirely beautiful and entirely alien. It does not fight out of malice. There is nothing personal about it at all. It fights because it is the Elden Ring's body, because the Elden Ring must be protected, because the greater will wills it. The battle with the Elden Beast is the final confrontation between a mortal, Tarnished, and the cosmic force that has been shaping the lands, between since before memory. It runs across a great glowing arena, throwing golden waves and holy light, manifesting its own Elden Ring and launching it across the battlefield. When it is defeated, the Elden Ring's runes scatter once more, and the Tarnished approaches them. Here is the choice. Here is the moment the story has been building toward. What do you do with the Elden Ring? The Tarnished stands before the shattered Elden Ring. Grace surrounds them. Marika's cracked form rests nearby. The Elden Beast has fallen. This is what the Tarnished was called back for. This moment. After all the roads travelled, all the demigods faced, all the stories learned and people helped and places seen. This is the purpose. Restore the Elden Ring. Become Elden Lord. Choose what the new age will be. There are 6 possible endings. The first is the most straightforward, the Age of Fracture. The Tarnished simply restores the Elden Ring as it was, without any additional mending, without any external rune to reshape its laws. The Golden Order resumes, more or less as it was, with the Tarnished on the throne in place of Marika. The Greater Will's design continues. The cycle of grace, of life and death and renewal under the Erdtree carries on. It is, in a sense, the conservative ending, the world restored to its previous form. Functional, perhaps, but it does not address the things that caused the shattering in the first place. The second is the Age of Duskborn, achieved through Fear's mending rune of the Death Prince. The Elden Ring is restored with death properly reintegrated. Those who've been held outside death's embrace can finally pass on. The undead rest. The hollowed find peace. It is a compassionate ending, one that addresses a specific and terrible injustice, though its broader implications for how the world functions are less clear. The third is the Age of Order, achieved through Brother Corin and Goldmask's mending rune of perfect order. Goldmask, that wandering prophet, that golden-masked figure who stood on the bridges of Leyndell studying the Erdtree in silence, who communicated only through gesture while Corin translated, had worked out the fundamental flaw in the Golden Order. He had a solution, a mending rune that would perfect the order, correct its errors, eliminate its hypocrisies. The Age of Perfect Order would be an age of almost mechanical divine justice. The Greater Will's intention fulfilled completely. It sounds good, idealized even, but perfect order leaves no room for the human. The fourth is the Age of Stars, Ranni's ending. As described, the Tarnished becomes Ranni's consort and accompanies her into the cosmos, and the lands between enters an age free of outer god interference. Mysterious, wide, open. The fifth is the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending. Everything burns, the world ends. It is presented with the same weight and solemnity as the other endings, which is its own kind of statement. And the sixth, only available if a very specific set of conditions is met during the journey, is the Blessing of Despair, Dung Eater's Curse, the mending rune of the Fell Curse, a corruption of the Elden Ring that would spread the Omen curse across all of humanity, born from one of the most disturbing characters in the game, the Dung Eater, a figure whose appetites and cruelties are genuinely difficult to engage with. This ending takes the concept of what if the next age was built on hatred and degradation, and answers it plainly. Then that is what the next age would be. Each ending is presented with the same visual grandeur and weight. The Tarnished rising to the throne, the Erdtree transforming, Marika shattering or ascending, the world turning on its new axis. There is no congratulations, There is no clear statement of what the right choice was. There never is. That is perhaps the point. The story of the lands between is not only the main road, it is also Alexander the Iron Fist, a living jar, a pot made of ceramic and held together with the remains of warriors sealed inside, who wants to become a warrior in a jar worth telling stories about, who came to the festival of Radagon because fighting the strongest demigod seemed like the thing to do, who you meet at various points across the journey, always cheerful, always a little stuck in some bog or narrow passage, always willing to share what he's learned. He is one of the few beings in the lands between who seems to be having a genuinely good time. He dies well if you let him. He asks to be cracked open, and his essence, all those warriors inside him, passes into you. A warrior in a jar indeed. It is also Kenneth Haight, a minor noble of Limgrave, holding out in a ruined fort, waiting for a Tarnished to come restore order so that he can re-establish his small domain. Pompous and specific and oddly charming. He eventually makes Nefeli Lu, Godfrey's adopted daughter, his new queen, which is perhaps the most orderly and hopeful development in the entire lands between. It is Millicent, given Millennia's golden needle to reintegrate her parasitic scarlet rot arm, who is actually a clone of Millennia, one of several created through Miquella's arts. She is the most vivid of them. She goes to the Haligtree to face her own nature, and depending on whether the Tarnished helps or hinders her, she either achieves something close to peace or becomes something else entirely. It is Nefeli Lu, discovering the truth of her parentage, that she is adopted daughter to Godfrey, Huara Lu, the first Elden Lord, and having to decide what to do with a legacy she didn't ask for. It is Bok the Seamster, a demi-human who was cursed to become a tree by his fellow demi-humans, who the Tarnished restores to his proper form with a particular Erdtree leaf, and who then takes up his needle and thread and offers to alter garments. A small life, a good one. He worries about his appearance, worries he's not handsome enough. If told the Elden Ring's power could remake him, he'll pursue it at the cost of his life. If simply told he's beautiful as he is, a response available in the dialogue, he stops. He is content. Sometimes the smallest kindness is the largest thing. It is D, Hunter of the Dead, who mourns and hates in equal measure the undead he kills, whose twin is given new purpose by Fear's work. It is Gideon Ofnir, who turns against the Tarnished at the last moment because he believes the goal is impossible, because he has spent so long accumulating knowledge that he has forgotten what knowledge is for. It is Melina, the maiden who gives the Tarnished the ability to level up, who burns herself at the forge of the giants in service of the greater purpose, who in one ending returns with eyes that see differently now, fire behind them. It is every wandering knight who chose the wrong patron and died for it, every sight of grace glowing in the dark of a ruin, every message left by Tarnished travelers on the ground, suggesting things of various degrees of helpfulness and occasionally suggesting you try jumping off a cliff. The lands between is full of stories, more than can be told in any single telling. Let us pause here near the end and think about something. Grace is the thing that calls the Tarnished back. It is the light that points the way forward, the small golden glow that appears at sights of grace, that indicates direction, that says, here, rest, here is safety for a moment. But grace is also, and this is worth sitting with, the greater will's leash. Every time the Tarnished follows grace's guidance, they are following the course that some cosmic intelligence has determined is the right one. Every sight of grace is a checkpoint in a program written by something vast and alien. The freedom to choose an ending is, itself, only possible because the greater will's design allowed it, or failed to anticipate it. Ranni understands this. She cut the thread. She severed the connection. And in doing so, she achieved something the greater will never intended, a genuinely free choice about the future. The other endings are, in varying degrees, still within the greater will's acceptable parameters. The age of order is exactly what the greater will wanted. The age of fracture is the status quo restored. Even the age of Dustborn might be acceptable. A correction of a flaw, death restored to its function. Only the age of stars is truly outside the design. And the frenzied flame, of course, which burns the design itself. What the story asks, in its quiet way, is, what is grace for? Is it guidance or is it control? Is following the light an act of faith or an act of compliance? And if they are the same thing, if faith in the greater will and compliance with this program are identical, is that faith worth having? There are no easy answers. There are only the choices the Tarnished makes, one demigod at a time, one step into the golden light at a time, building toward an ending that will redefine a world. Let us look up before we finish. Above the lands between, there is the cosmos, the same stars that Radagon held in place with his sorcery, the same heavenly bodies that the Nock studied and the Corian royal family drew power from, the stars that the Fingerslayer blade was pointed at, metaphorically, the stars that represent powers beyond the greater will's golden order, the outer gods. They are numerous, and most of them remain mostly unknown. We have touched on several. The greater will, the cosmic ordering intelligence whose instrument is the Erdtree, whose law is the Elden Ring, whose design for the lands between has been unfolding since before history. The Scarlet Rot, the corruptive outer god whose power has afflicted millennia since birth, whose influence spread through Caelid in the bloom, whose underground manifestation is the lake of rot, the frenzied flame, the fire of dissolution, of forced unity, of the end of individuality, the formless mother, the blood divinity that whispered to Mog, the one-eyed god, the worshipped deity of the demi-humans, and others barely glimpsed, the god of rot in its full form, the powers associated with the ancient dragons, the intelligence that Ranni reached out to when she decided to abandon the greater will's path. These outer gods are not evil in most cases. They are, in the way of cosmic powers in this world, simply interested in certain things. The greater will is interested in order. The Scarlet Rot is interested in decay and renewal, corrosion as a form of change. The frenzied flame is interested in unity. They reach into the physical world through the beings most susceptible to their influence, and they reshape those beings in their own image. The Tarnished, the player, is the one figure in the story who is not obviously claimed by any of these forces, or rather, they are available to be claimed by any of them, or by none. They can pursue Ranni's cosmic independence, or embrace the frenzied flame, or restore the greater will's order, or craft something new from the pieces of all of it. This is why Grace chose them, perhaps. Not because they are strong. The lands between is full of stronger beings. Not because they are wise. They know almost nothing when they begin. But because they are, in some fundamental sense, uncommitted. They can still choose. We began with Godfrey. Let us return to him. After his exile, Godfrey wandered the outer world. He set aside his title, his grace, his identity as the first Elden Lord, and became again what he had been before Marika. Huara Lu, a fighter, a man defined by combat, pure and simple. He found new wars. He conquered peoples in the outer world. He eventually settled, built something, perhaps a family, perhaps a following, but always with one eye on the horizon, where the lands between shimmered beyond the fog. When the two fingers sent out the call to the Tarnished, Godfrey heard it too. He was still a Tarnished after all, still touched by grace even if diminished. And he came back. He came to the Ashen Capital, to the site of his former throne. He stands in Lendel, enormous and golden even in his age, his warrior's body still immense and powerful, waiting for whoever comes. He is not angry. He is not sad. He is present. He is Huaralu, and before that he was Godfrey, and he came back because the land called him, and the land is his, in some deep sense that even exile could not extinguish. The fight with Godfrey, and then with Huaralu, is one of the great confrontations of the journey. In his first phase, he is the Elden Lord, formal and ceremonial, carrying golden light into his attacks. In his second phase, he rips Sarosh from his back, freeing himself from the great lion spirit that tempered his ferocity, and becomes the wild warrior he was before civilization took him. He was waiting for someone worthy to follow him to the throne. He wanted to see, one more time, if anyone could surpass him. When defeated, his words are not bitterness. They are a kind of benediction. He acknowledges what he sees in the Tarnished. He goes with dignity. His story ends where it began, in the act of combat, in the testing of another, in the passing of something forward to hands that are ready to hold it. The Tarnished is you, or not quite you. The Tarnished is an empty vessel, a character defined almost entirely by action rather than history, a figure who arrived on the shores of Limgrave with nothing and accumulated a world. This is the tradition of the FromSoftware narrative, the protagonist as reader, the player as the active principal. The story is not about who the Tarnished was before the game started. It is about who they become through the act of playing. Every time you died and came back, every site of grace where you exhaled, every NPC whose story you followed to its end, and every one you missed entirely. The lands between that exists in your playthrough is slightly different from the one in anyone else's playthrough. Not because the world changes, but because which stories you followed, which alliances you made, which mending rune you sought or didn't seek. These choices accumulated into a specific experience of the world. The Tarnished is, in this way, the only person in the lands between who was not born into its story. They arrived from outside. They had no fixed place in the Golden Order's hierarchy, no allegiance predetermined by blood or grace. They were maidenless, without guidance, without patron, without a predetermined role. And this is what makes them suitable for the throne. Not power, not wisdom, not purity. The fact of their openness, the fact that they arrived with nothing and therefore could be anything. The ending they choose is not the ending they were told to choose. It cannot be. There is no one authority in the lands between who could tell them definitively what the world should become. Marika is broken. The two fingers have multiple and conflicting recommendations. The demigods are dead. Grace points the way, but grace is not a voice that says this ending and no other. The Tarnished chooses, and the world becomes what it becomes. The Erdtree's light, whatever form it takes after the ending chosen, golden as it was, different or absent entirely. It touches the same land it has always touched. The same green hills of Limgrave, the same blue lakes of Liurnia, the same red sands of Caelid and snow peaks of the mountaintops, and underground rivers and ancient ruined cities. The land does not know that history just turned. It continues in the way that land continues. Seasons cycling, grass growing, water finding its way to the sea. Somewhere in a great tree, the accumulated runes of thousands of years of life and death and hope and grief glow softly. Somewhere in a crumbling ruin outside time, an ancient dragon waits for a god that never returned, curled in the form of lordship, patient as stone. Somewhere underground, a city of silver-skinned people looks up at the full stars in the ceiling of their cavern and thinks of the sky. Somewhere on a frozen peak, the last ember of a dead god's fire burns behind the ribs of a chained giant who has been watching since before the Golden Order existed and will keep watching, if it comes to that, long after it ends. Somewhere between worlds, in a place without coordinates, the spirit of a small wolf man who chose loyalty over destiny has gone quiet. Somewhere on a cliff in Leonia, a spirit in a doll lifts her 4 arms and turns her face toward a moon that is finally moving again. And somewhere at the beginning, somewhere on the shores of a coast where the sea comes in and the first step waits, a Tarnished is waking up, looking at the Erdtree on the horizon, getting to their feet, beginning. The story of the Elden Ring has ended, or it has begun again. It always does. Sleep now, if you want to. Let the lands between settle into that soft place just at the edge of dreaming, where the golden light doesn't quite reach, where the music of sights of grace becomes the hum of something warm and distant and safe. You've walked a long way tonight. Rest. The path will still be there in the morning.